Okay. With the alcohol, body electronics, you also, there's a lot of implications here because when you have people on the table, there's sometimes a lot of entity involvement with a lot of alcohol drinking. So you should be aware if your client is drinking, and if you can get them off the alcohol, it would be really helpful. The recreational drugs, I think we covered that yesterday. Fruit. Okay, vitamin C. Now, we don't recommend ascorbic acid because we have found that it acts as a suppressive agent. I think John talked about this yesterday. Like, for instance, if you have a cold, you take vitamin C, your nose will stop running. Any more questions on that? We're suggesting to get all your vitamin C from fruit. If you eat enough fruit during the day, you should have all the vitamin C you need. Okay. Eat raw protein foods at least twice a day. Now, if you cook your proteins, then you destroy 2 amino acids, tryptophan and lysine. That's why we suggest to have raw protein foods. What we're using the spirulina, low temperature processed, bee pollen, raw fish from a unpolluted area, if you can find it anymore. Blue-green algae, barley green powder. Okay. F. Take a regular oxygen supplement 3 times a day. The normal dosage that we use is 20 drops 3 times a day. And this is just a regular stabilized oxygen that you can get from a health food store. 07, Genesis, what do they call it here? Maglite? Neclite 2. Sully's, okay. G, keep the colon open such that one gets to the toilet about a half an hour after each meal. Now this is an important question because when you're going to ask the person, do you go to the toilet, they're going to say, oh yeah, I go plenty, once a day. And then you have to tell them that they're supposed to be going a half an hour after the meal. When your colon's really working good, that's what will happen. So be clear with that because some people, they even go like every 3 days and they think they're doing okay. And for the colon, Neil, yes.
If it's actually working like that, does that mean that your colon's completely empty and it's cleared out?
Should be clearing, I think, within 24 hours. Isn't that correct, John? Varies a bit. But, yes, within 24 hours it should be clearing from the food you ate.
When that large intestine is working properly, you will have a peristaltic action, like a pumping like this. You'll feel it all the way from the cecum, all the way around, and you'll have a good dump.
Okay, for colon problems.
Let's look at that again. Now, normally when you eat, okay, the gallbladder goes squirt at a certain time. And all of the bile goes to the small intestine, which does 2 things. It's used to emulsify the fat on one hand, but it also is an aid for stimulating the peristaltic action of the small intestine, which then triggers, this is usually about 20 minutes to a half an hour after you eat, and then that triggers the large intestine to have a full evacuation. So do what you have to do to have the bowels free and clear, so that you're going at least about 3 times a day if you're eating 3 times a day. Some people eat only once a day. That changes things. Some people eat twice a day. That changes things.
The pawpaw seeds usually help you to go more often. And also, when I get the person on the oxygen, that seems to make them go. And then I also use psyllium powder. If it doesn't, some people, they find it binds them up, but others, after a while, once it gets in there, then it starts brushing through everything. And also, if they don't have the urge to go, I use the formula from Nature Sunshine, LBS2. Do you get Nature Sunshine here? Yeah. Yes. Oxymag also. That really makes me go. Oxymag, you can get that from Enzyme International.
You can buy it in quantity from Priest River, Idaho. There's the Oxymag Corporation up there. Now, that particular brand of oxygen is excellent because you have 8 atoms of oxygen for every 1 atom of magnesium. And it's put together so that when you take it internally and in an acid environment, or with citrus juice, like orange juice, then it just breaks it off 1 little atom at a time, and it has a tremendous effect upon the body. And you get a little magnesium on top of it. Ruth?
What goes straight away? I believe it says on the bottle 1/4 of a teaspoon with orange juice. Yeah, with orange juice. Yes.
Suppose you take this Greenfields liquid. Is it acid enough for Oxymag?
No, it's not. You need like a citrus drink.
Before I went on the program, I had a bowel movement 1.3 times a day, every day for about 16 years. When I went on the program, and you know what a fanatic I am, I obeyed the instructions exactly, psyllium tea every morning and so on. I was lucky if I had a bowel movement once every 2nd day. And now I'm having a bowel movement maybe once a day. I've tried not to panic, but I was pretty surprised. After having a bowel movement 1.3 times a day for 16 years, it's pretty surprising when I get on the program, which is supposed to make me go 3 times a day, and the opposite happens. But I thought perhaps it was cutting down the bulk of the intake, because now I eat half as much as I did before, maybe less than half as much. So I thought that might have something to do with it. Is that possible?
Possible. Try Oxymag. Oh, Tom.
You say you studied under Dr. John Christopher? Okay, I thought the guy was outrageous, all the stuff that he wrote. Since he's dead now, are his herb formulas that are being formulated by, I think, the herb shop and places like that in Utah, are those formulas still good to use, or should you just use his formulas on the stuff that you grow and pick?
Let's look at this carefully, all right? Dr. John Christopher didn't have time to write that big book that you have seen because he was plagued with people wherever he went. He was traveling from speaking engagement to speaking engagement. He was a great old bird. He was a wonderful man and a loving, caring person. Now, he had packages and packages of books and notes and cards and whatnot. And he went to a dear friend of mine. At that time, she is about 70 years of age. Edith Andre. And she asked Edith, and you've never heard of Edith Andre. You probably never will. But he asked her if she would ghostwrite his book. And she agreed to do it. Now, one time she fell off of her chair and broke her hip, and we had to fix her hip again so she'd go back up there and rearrange all these cards for that book, the textbook of natural healing. Now, one thing that happened here is she was the one that wrote the book for Dr. John Raymond Christopher. Now, the point of it all is, most of those things in that book are not John Raymond Christopher's. But he used all of that information from time to time because it came from a host of other people that he gathered here and gathered there and put them in this huge compilation, which Edith Andre correlated it, brought it together, and used it. Now, because of his name, you have everyone wanting to capitalize on his name, so they have all these herbal formulations, which is the Christopher formulation. Well, it is the Christopher formulation because that's the name on it. But let's take a look at it, that Dr. John Raymond Christopher gathered all of his information from other sources. Where do I get my source work material? I get it from other people. I borrow it here, I borrow it there. I learn from this person, I learn from that person. Okay? I try to give credit where credit is due. There are a few things I've come up with that are a little unique and original. But I find out many years later that someplace down there in southern India, they've been teaching that for 4,000 years. And I sit back and say, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's the way it is. We just simply find it for ourselves occasionally, and we think it's ours. We find out it's not ours, it's the universe. You see what I'm saying? So even though Dr. Christopher had his name on this, and he used these herbs, many of these herbs came from just people that nobody ever knew, people that never got any recognition for what they did, and they just simply sat back somewhere and just took care of sick people and got them well. Yes, he did. He got some formulas through prayer. This is correct. He wasn't stealing at all. I'm just telling you how it is because I knew these people. I knew the people very well who were involved in it. This is how a lot of this came apart. But all of this was Dr. John Raymond Christopher's compilation of material that he got from a variety of sources that he never found time himself to put together. The formulas work for some people. Any herbal formula sometimes will work for one person but may not work for another. Now, this is where the kahuna techniques are valid. Let me give an illustration. Doug, do you mind if I talk about your little daughter? All right. Now, in the kahuna training, what we have learned how to do, and this is very simple. You take a person and feel their energy pattern. You just feel their energy pattern. And once you have that energy pattern and you know it and feel it, it's imprinted in your mind. Now, the energy pattern can change. So if they're sick, they have a certain energy pattern. What does homeopathy do? You find a problem, so a little bit of something will cure a problem that was caused by a big something, all right? And so similars cure similars. It's the whole basic concept of homeopathy. The kahunas for centuries have done this. This comes from the Minahuni. It goes back and back in time. I take Doug's energy pattern, I go out here and I feel the energies of all the plants and barks and whatnot, and sometimes I have to do a little traveling here and there until I get the exact energy pattern that Doug has at the moment. I bring it back, and I will know exactly how to apply it to the situation, and then the symptoms are gone almost immediately. Would you like to talk about little Megan, for example?
Well, back, I guess, about just a couple of weeks ago, around Christmas time, we were up in Kerikeri, up northern part of New Zealand, And Megan had one particular day had a really, really bad headache, and she was in quite a lot of pain with it. And John, and she had a good fever there, which a number of us had felt on her forehead there. And John just kind of tuned in and went walking out in the yard there. This is at Babaji and Cecilia's place, and he found a little little blue flower out there. And I didn't actually see exactly how you did it. Did you just have her roll it in her palm?
Very simple. If you look right here, you see a chakra system right here in the center of the left hand. And in this case, this was for Megan and specific for Megan. And I took the flower and rubbed it into that chakra in a clockwise manner. And that's all I did.
And basically, within, I suppose, no more than a minute or two, the fever was totally gone and the headache was gone, and she felt absolutely perfect. I mean, like it was like she'd never been sick in the first place, or never, whether it was sick or healing crisis, she was right out of it, just like that.
And that was the exact energy pattern that needed to be done to balance the energy pattern of Megan at that moment. Now, when we learn how to use the herbs properly, we don't use this herb is always for that. Remember, Megan? Remember that little blue flower I put in your little hand? Remember that headache you had and the fever you had? How fast did that go?
Well, it went not so fast, but it went as fast as it could.
Minute or two?
Mm-hmm.
Minute or two, and she is right back out there running around doing what she had to do. Of course, her appetite returned quite well at that time, too, and we had a lovely dinner. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
But this is the thing. When you have this knowledge, and you realize that the plants are alive and they have vibrancy, and you learn to feel the vibrancy of a piece of moss. You'll learn to feel the vibrancy of a leaf from a tree. You'll learn to feel the vibrancy of a person. And sometimes you get a little bit tuned in. You can feel the person's stomach ache and their headaches and whatnot. And like I told you how you do the same thing with a little bird, you feel the broken wing, and as you feel the broken wing for the bird, the broken wing heals. Unfortunately, the same principle applies to people. And you can tune into an individual in point holding, and you feel their bellyache before they feel their bellyache, and you go right through that bellyache with them, or headache. And some of you are quite in tune with that, and you're already doing what I'm trying to tell you, how simple it is, because you're already doing it. There's no secrets here. Just get the energy of the person and feel what they're going. You are doing it. You know what I'm talking about. You go right through the energy field and feel it with the person. You match the energies from the herbs, and they're healed instantly. It's like a homeopathic remedy, only it's specially geared for that energy that you're feeling.
Okay. H. Use no cooked or fried oils or fats.
Well, we should know this, Anita, right? How far have we made it here? Oh, that's at least a couple weeks worth of work there. A short time back, just maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, I started to get a sense that there was something up there, more or less above us, but kind of in that direction. So I nipped outside to see if I could get a peek there, and I wasn't able to physically see anything up there other than some kind of strange cloud formations. But it's interesting because right at that time, Paul came running out where he'd been on the phone, and he said he'd heard this kind of noise that he hears every now and again, just at that moment that I came out, where he says it sounds a bit like a cicada, but it really isn't any sort of insect. It's some kind of other noise, and you'll notice there's all sorts of background noise going on that if you don't really think about it, it just sounds like a bunch of insects, but there's all these different types of frequencies and things going on.
Like a humming. How many have been hearing that humming? Anita heard that early this morning.
And as I was just kind of sitting out there on the lawn, you'll remember the couple of days back, John just asked for a show of hands on individuals that had had like experiences of, memories of being abducted. And you remember there's about 7 people or so that raised their hand at that time. And as I was sitting out there, and I'm not one of them, by the way. If I've ever been abducted, I don't remember it yet. I might have slept through it. But I noticed just sitting out there that, within a matter of about 3 or 4 minutes, it was a regular abductees convention, because about 4 or 5 out of the 7 that raised their hand all of a sudden came out within about 2 or 3 minutes of each other. They were all outside there. So something's going on.
I had several people discuss this with me. Let's bring it out and have some fun with it, okay? Remember, we're talking about the Pine Gap situation, and all of a sudden everything got very dark in here? Are you aware that people were outside here and looking around and the sun was shining perfectly? There wasn't a cloud in the sky. You aware of that? But everything got very, very dark in here, and you looked out and you looked kind of out through the darkness. And it's interesting here because they're even outside, and Ian was sitting there looking very keenly outside, and even it appeared darker out there. Is that correct, Ian? Everything was getting darker. But the people who were outside or right by the window looking out, they couldn't. There was no darkness outside. Now this is a little interesting to us because I had 2 people at least said that their little tape recorders went completely off. Battery. We had people that had, how many tape recorders went off? May I see a show of hands? 1? 2. And that's the only 2 that were on. Okay, you weren't aware. But I've seen that happen several times in classes and lectures such as this. Then some people, the pens wouldn't flow in their, the ink wouldn't flow in their pens when they couldn't write. How many did that happen to? Can I see a show of hands? Look at this now. All of you had perfectly good pens, and all of a sudden they wouldn't work. Put your hands up of those whose pens didn't work during that moment. About 8, 9 people. Okay, there you are. Now, that's a little interesting to me. The rest of you weren't writing. But the thing is this is very interesting to me because suddenly you couldn't write, you couldn't record, and did anything happen to the main piece of equipment up there? Nothing. That's interesting, too. But remember, we had to turn the lights on to see for a while, and then gradually that blackness and just kind of disappeared like a big cloud over the place. This is something that I think you should be aware of, and I have been asked specifically by 4 people to just have each of you, in your own unique way, put up your prayers for a protection of everybody here, and we'll all be assured of a very pleasant, very peaceful, orderly stay. But we are being watched.
I actually have a question, John. As I was sitting out there, I was just kind of struck by something that I'd never really considered before. Is there any relationship between UFO activity and dry climates? Because I'm just struck by the incidents in Australia, and in the U.S. it seems to be a tremendous amount out in the southwest, in the desert area.
Yeah, there's a lot of dry humor out there about UFOs. I don't have any idea, Doug.
This morning I went for an early walk down and came back the roadway, and just before the sun came up, I saw in the distance, it looked like a flock of birds coming forward, but it didn't move. And with no shape at all, but it was just like a flock of birds. But it didn't move, and the next thing it just floated away, disappeared. It didn't move, but it was, it's like but it wasn't an object or anything, but in the distance, it looked like a flock of birds. But it didn't move. It just, and the next thing, I watched it and watched it. I thought, what is that? And it wasn't part of a tree or anything. I looked, it was in the space, way up in the sky. And the next thing, it just floated away. So, you know, we're getting this.
Nothing to be concerned with. Anita has a story to tell.
Fats and oils?
Anita doesn't have a story to tell. Get her aside, and if you can talk to her, she says there was something that she experienced that would be very, very important for some of you to be aware of. So I'll let you work that out with Anita.
Okay. Use no cooked or fried oils and fats. Now, this includes, for the vegetarians, the health freaks out there, this includes stir-fry. Because a lot of people tell me they're not using heated oils and fats, but they're stir-frying every day, every night for their dinner. So this is where the molecule, when you heat the fat or the oil or the butter or the margarine, the molecule shifts from a cis isomer to a trans isomer. And then the body can't break this down. Now, Doug, do you want to go into it in more detail?
Basically, when you have your fats and oils, they're made up of fatty acids, just as proteins are made up out of amino acids. And there's many different types of, or there's a lot of variety of fatty acids. But what you'll find is that when you have your unsaturated fatty acids, which is what you'll primarily find in your oils, the unsaturated fatty acid can take on two completely different forms or shapes. One is known as the cis fatty acid, which is like CIS, like cis fatty acid, CIS, and the other is the trans fatty acid. Now, cis and trans fatty acid, that does not apply to saturated fats. It only applies to unsaturated fats. But even in butter, for example, which is primarily saturated, there is some unsaturated fatty acid content. Bottom line here, the cis fatty acid is the form that's almost exclusively found in nature. It's very, very rare under normal circumstances to find a trans fatty acid in nature, and the cis fatty acid is the form that will be functional within the human body. When you subject a cis fatty acid to heat, the relevant temperature is approximately 320 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 160 degrees centigrade. About 320 Fahrenheit, which is just about 160, I think it's actually exactly 160 centigrade. And at that's the point at which the cis fatty acid will begin to get transformed into the trans fatty acid, just as a result of heat. Now, if you were to look at the molecular structure of the cis and the trans fatty acid, they're virtually identical. The major thing that's shifted here is the location of some of the hydrogen, and essentially what you have is the cis fatty acid kind of has a kink in it, like a bend, like a little angle like that in it. Whereas in that same spot where the cis fatty acid would be bent, the trans fatty acid will be quite straight. And the reason that the trans fatty acid is a problem for the body is basically that it's close enough to the cis fatty acid in molecular structure that it will take up the space of the cis fatty acid within the body, but unfortunately it won't do the work. It won't perform the function of the cis fatty acid. So if you want to use an analogy, it's like a key that will fit in a lock, but it won't open the door. And unfortunately, it has a tendency to get stuck in the lock. So this is one of the main reasons that we have so many problems with the trans fatty acids. So basically, any fat or oil that you cook, because even like butter and lard and things like that have a certain degree of unsaturated fatty acid content. So any fat or oil that you cook above 320 Fahrenheit or 160 centigrade, which is most cooking, you're going to produce some of these trans fatty acids, which are basically going to gum up the body. They're going to settle out in the tissues. And if you want to consider one of many, many different ways in which this is going to be a problem for the body, just look at the structure of your average cell, where the cell wall or the cell membrane has a fairly substantial fatty component. I mean, the fatty acids make up a good bit of the cell membrane, and obviously the cell membrane has a very, very important function because it's supposed to let certain things into the cell, but not let other things into the cell. And it's supposed to let certain things out of the cell, but not let other things out of the cell. So if you start having your cell membranes made up out of trans fatty acids to some extent, then this entire function of letting the right things in and not the wrong things, and letting the right things out but not the wrong things, that whole function is going to start to break down, and you're going to have all sorts of chaos right down at the cellular level. Now, there's many, many other areas in which you're going to run into trouble, but that's a pretty obvious one, is that the entire structure and thus function of the cell membrane is going to be disrupted simply through the ingestion of your cooked fats and oils. I might add that one of the worst things out there in this area is going to be all of your margarines, because the process of hydrogenation, which is how you make margarine, this is a process that takes place at a fairly high temperature, much, much, much higher than is necessary to create the trans fatty acids. So if you'll see this under different terms, but basically margarine, or your partially hydrogenated oils, or your vegetable shortenings, which are the typical names you'll see on the label, all three of these things are just going to be chock full of trans fatty acids. The average margarine will be anywhere from about 16 to 44% trans fatty acid by weight. So you're getting a tremendous amount of trans fatty acids, not just from your normal cooked fats and oils that people consume, but through the margarines, and these types of substances are found in most of your baked goods. So all the cookies and biscuits and crackers and cakes that you're out there buying are just chock full of your partially hydrogenated oils or margarines. So these are some of the main dietary sources. So as Anita is saying here, you've got to stay away from the cooked fats and oils in all forms if you want to guard against the danger of the trans fatty acids.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, I'm going to move to J. Refrain from using all pork products. Now, as John has said many times, the pig doesn't sweat, so all the toxins will be going into the meat. So therefore, by eating the pig meat, you'll be getting a lot of toxins in the body. Refrain from all canned meat and fish. Virtually, these things are cooked to death, and so you're not really getting many nutrients from having canned fish and meat. Yes, if you have a question, please come up. Canned tuna, Paul? Withdraw from stimulating drinks. Okay. In a can of Coke, there's about 7 tablespoons of white sugar. So I don't think I have to talk more on that. I think we all know the dangers of white sugar. Yes. Do you have a question? Yes. Go ahead. On the white sugar. Okay. They drain you of B vitamins, the white sugar. And also, they have within it a substance which affects the collagen of the body, causing aging to happen.
Well, just on the subject of stimulating drinks, let's not neglect our caffeine here. So we have to be very careful with the coffee, the black teas, which will have a similar type substance. And of course, a lot of your soft drinks are going to be very high in the caffeine as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I remember reading in a yoga journal about how when we breathe out carbon dioxide, and it's sort of poison to the body. I just wondered whether the carbon in carbonated drinks has the effect of accumulating that, or whether it doesn't get into the system.
Same thing.
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's what the bubbly stuff is the CO2, the carbon dioxide. So you're basically with your soft drinks, you're taking in a waste product.
Okay, eat whole wheat bread in preference to white processed flour bread. Well, this is for the fiber, of course. The white bread has a tendency to stick to the colon wall, causing a lot of problems in the colon, sluggish colons. Refrain from products which contain artificial sweeteners. Now, I think in the handouts we'll be giving the articles on saccharin, NutraSweet, all these, but these affect your short-term memory. They affect your... That's a good example. Okay, give up gradually all products that contain margarine. Okay, we talked about that already. Give up gradually all products that contain white sugar. Okay. Begin eating more fruit and veggies grown without chemicals and sprays. Well, I think we all know about that. We don't want to take the toxic chemicals into our body. Eat fruits alone and a half hour before eating veggies and protein meals. Now, this is what we were talking about the other day, the food combining, where it's good to have the fruit before the meal. A lot of people have fruit desserts. This causes a lot of fermentation in the stomach, yes. Okay. Give up gradually all junk foods. Okay. Begin eating more fresh and raw foods. Drink the milk of the new coconut and eat the soft flesh. Yes, the soft flesh of the coconut, this has within it the essential fatty acids, which help to clear out the blood vessels. Okay, now we're using the flax oil. The flax oil has about 98% essential fatty acid, whereas the coconut meat, the jelly meat of the coconut, will have only about 1%. The soft meat inside the coconut, I call it the jelly meat. So that has about 1% of the essential fatty acids to help clean out the arteries. Eat papaya seeds on a regular basis to help the colon to properly eliminate. This is what I was talking about before, to get that colon going. It really gets you going there, the pawpaw seeds. Okay. There's one contraindication, and that is where the seeds act as a natural abortive. And you'll find in some of the countries like India and Asia where the women take these on a regular basis so they don't get pregnant. So if you do want to become pregnant, stay off the pawpaw seeds for a while. The pawpaw seeds? Papaya in like Maui or Hawaii, things like that, but in tropical areas, yes. Okay. Coordinate with medical doctors on all medications, whether the physical walls of physical body regenerate. This is very, very important. You have to ask the person if they are on medication, and also, we don't take them off the medication. We leave them on the medication and have them start on the program. And gradually, as their body gets better, we have the doctor coordinate the medication with them. We don't take them off. Yes.
I was told in case you are taking homeopathic medicals, you can't, in a heavy amount, you can't go on body electronics. Is it right? In case you are taking homeopathics in a huge amount, you can't go on body electronics.
There are certain certain individuals, and we'll kind of go into this in greater detail next week in the iridology, but you'll find certain individuals who are very, very ill, they're in very, very poor health, and the only thing that keeps them going is what's called a constitutional homeopathic remedy, which will be a very, very specific homeopathic remedy that's expressly designed and in tune with that one particular individual. And there's individuals that John's seen over the years where as long as they take their constitutional homeopathic, they basically feel all right. They make it through the day. But if they were to stop taking their constitutional homeopathic for even a day or two, they would very rapidly go downhill and be at death's door in a very short time. The only reason the constitutional homeopathic works is because it's a very, very precise match for that person's energy pattern. If that person were to start doing body electronics and start to go into healing crisis, their entire energy pattern would change. The constitutional homeopathic would no longer keep them in balance, and they would go into a quite abrupt and potentially fatal tailspin. So there are certain individuals, it's pretty rare, but there are some individuals where you'd be much better off saying, hey, just stay in your homeopathy and enjoy your sunset years here.
Okay, I need to take a 5-minute break here, or if you want to continue. Oh, okay, all right.
On the medication, a couple of things to consider here. Most of us here, I think, with probably very few exceptions, have very little or no training in pharmaceuticals. There may be a few exceptions here, but I think it's safe to say that most of us doing body electronics, we really don't know medication. It's not what we're trained in. And the thing, now some of you may. We have nurses here and others that will have a certain amount of training in this. Frankly, I have none, so it's not my field of expertise whatsoever. Don't really care to have much expertise in that area. But bottom line here is there's some medication that you could stop taking abruptly and it really wouldn't be that big of a deal for the body. There's certain medications that you could stop and it wouldn't be fatal. It might be a little uncomfortable, but it really wouldn't be much of a problem one way or another. But just as surely there's other medications where if you were to stop taking that medication, you could be in very, very serious trouble, and in some cases you might actually die from not taking your medication. And the reality, as Anita suggested, is you really got to check with whoever put you on the medication in the first place. You really got to get a good, understanding of what the consequences are of not taking that medication. Some things that we'll come across very frequently, like is there anybody here in this room who's on insulin? Do you have any diabetics here? Okay, this is something you're going to come across all the time in body electronics, are insulin-dependent diabetics. Now, consider a couple of things here. If the individual takes too much insulin, that can be quite a serious problem. If they take more insulin than they actually need, that's obviously got some serious consequences, but it's also quite serious if they're not getting enough insulin. Most diabetics handle this by monitoring their own blood sugar on a fairly consistent basis, and also, of course, most diabetics, it becomes a way of life to where they very carefully monitor the different symptoms, and they basically will regulate their own dose in response to what, their level of exercise and what they're eating and that sort of thing. What's going to happen to the person's need for insulin when they start doing body electronics? The pancreas is going to start to regenerate, so what's likely going to happen is the need for insulin is going to start to decline, and it may actually start to decline quite rapidly within a matter of a week or two. So what would happen if the individual sort of paid no attention to the blood sugar and kept taking the same amount of insulin they'd always been taking? They would be in serious trouble because the pancreas is now secreting more insulin. Maybe it was hardly secreting any before, and this could be quite a serious thing. So the diabetic has to be very careful. Fortunately, with diabetics, they're already doing that most of the time. They're already regulating their dose. A situation that we run into, which is much more tricky, is people on thyroid medication, where they're taking the thyroid hormone. Is there anybody here who's taken the synthroid or the bovine type thyroid? Anyone? Okay. This is quite a bit trickier because, again, you have to bring things into a certain level here, and if it's obviously it's not a good idea to have too much thyroid medication any more than it would be a good idea to have too little. But as your thyroid starts to regenerate, it's going to start secreting the hormones again, bit by bit, And so your need for thyroid medication is going to decline. The thing to realize is, if you're screwed up on your insulin dosage, the effect will be pretty obvious within a relatively short time. Probably less than a couple of days, maybe a matter of hours sometimes. With the thyroid medication, the tricky thing is that the effects are not at all obvious. Sometimes it's not obvious for even several weeks. And I've known of a couple people on the body electronics program who've been on thyroid medication, the thyroid hormone, and on their own initiative, and actually I should say very much against all advice that we've given them, they've stopped taking their thyroid medication. And the thing about it is they get by fine for maybe a week or so, but they get down the line, and all of a sudden they bloat up like a toad. They swell all up and get all puffy in the water retention. They have zero energy, can't get out of bed. And it takes their physician maybe 2 or 3 months to get things settled out again where they're at a proper level of medication there. So the thing is, what you're going to have to do if you're on the thyroid medication is you're going to have to go in and get the tests done, maybe every couple of months, and gradually get yourself weaned down off of that medication without doing it so abruptly that you throw yourself into quite a potentially serious tailspin. I might add that one of the effects of the underactive thyroid is that you have a great predisposition towards all sorts of lymphatic congestion, cholesterol buildup, heart attacks, and all sorts of other things. So you're really playing with fire here if you try to go off your thyroid medication abruptly.
Okay, any more questions on that? What when the thyroid is being removed or another gland, also with the intake of herbs and also with body electronics, so the sessions. Okay. What to do when the thyroid, so there are 2 people, so the thyroid is being removed, totally gone, so what to do with that, and when there is another gland, it's not there anymore, so giving herbs still, and also what to do with the acupressure points.
Obviously those glands and organs that have been removed are going to be something we're going to have to deal with. Most likely for some time they're going to need to stay on that medication, but you have to recognize the possibility that gland or organ will actually regenerate. That may take quite some time to do if it ever happens at all. So perhaps one of the things to do would be to periodically get things tested. I don't think it's the kind of thing you'd have, like for example with the thyroid, if it was removed and they're on thyroid medication, I don't think it's the kind of thing they're going to need to get tested like every month or anything like that, but maybe once or twice a year, something like that, they might want to just kind of check and see how things are going there. I'm not sure if this is how well studied this is medically, but I have the impression that the body has tends to have a lot of backup mechanisms. And so chances are that if you've had one thing out, that there's probably other parts of the body that may be at least to some extent picking up the slack. And the way the body's going to regenerate anyways, you're going to get a lot of fluctuations. It's not going to be like a steady increase in output. It could be some ups and downs and some real wild fluctuations anyways. So it's something that's going to take a lot of attention. And in many, many instances, as Anita's recommending here, it's going to be very, very important to find a good naturally or alternatively oriented physician. I mean, get a good medical doctor that is, at least willing to work with you in this area, explain what you're trying to accomplish, and get somebody that's willing to kind of go along with you and work with you there.
Yes, I just wanted to make a point here. Just over 12 years ago, I had open heart surgery, a triple bypass graft. And since then, I've been on anginines if I need them, but I very rarely need them, zopitins and isodorals. Now lately, since I've been on body electronics, and just prior to that, I was cutting down my dosage. With the knowledge of my doctor, he said, see how you feel. If you feel you can do without it, cut it down, which I did. I was going from 3 tablets of each 3 times a day. This is the isopitins and the isodorals. I got down to 2, one twice a day. Now, I got very busy, and I ran out of some of my medication, and I forgot to renew it. And ye gods, it hit me. I went right the way down. I finished back up in hospital. So, just as I say, watch it, do it with with your doctor's knowledge, and I've got a good doctor. He doesn't mind the fact that I do body electronics and things. He just says, just keep me informed because I'm very interested in that. So, but keep in touch with your doctor and make certain that he knows what you're doing. So if you do overdo it or underdo it, he knows what's happening and he can correct it straight away.
I just want to say a doctor who's willing to work with you like that is a real gem. If you got one like that, hang on to him or her.
I just wanted to ask if a gland has been removed and therefore certain hormones aren't being produced in the body and the hormones are required as a catalyst for the regeneration, how that can affect you if you're taking synthetic hormones to replace it, if the body's still capable of somehow making up the slack.
I'm not 100% certain on that one, Graham. I think to some degree the synthetic hormones will fulfill the functions of the real thing, but to me it would seem like on some level or another you're still going to fall short, and it may be it's certainly going to be a greater challenge to regenerate the body in those areas. But I always feel like where there's life there's hope, and there's always the possibility that things can come right there. I've certainly seen a lot of people with glands that had pretty well shut down, and even glands that have been partially removed that have gotten back to where they had full normal function. It's perhaps a bit trickier when the gland's totally gone, but I think I'll turn the rest of the question over to John here.
There are people who are such purists that they won't allow any animal product to enter their body, and they die. If a person has a thyroid that has been surgically removed, they're going to need thyroxine. If a person's had another organ for one reason or another, they're going to have some sort of pituitary substance, like for the pituitary, if it's been destroyed, they're going to have some pituitary substance to keep them alive. And the thing is let's realize there's a time, place, and purpose for all things under heaven. And there's not just one answer. We would all like to live naturally as close as we can to nature, but sometimes we have to take thyroid substance to keep our bodies going so we can survive from day to day. And many people try to not take the thyroid substance, and they become very ill and remain ill, and they don't function. And so they can't feed their families, they can't take care of their kids, one thing or another, and there's chaos. So you're going to have to make a decision. And if you want to stick around in the body a little longer to take care of your kids and grandkids, then you better take some thyroid substance and fix that thyroid gland. If you've got some severe problems from an injury where you had a car wreck and you got your pituitary smashed, you might have to live the rest of your life on pituitary substance because the pituitary doesn't function properly. And if that pituitary substance has to come from an animal, then so be it. That's where it has to come from. I would mention to you that animal substance taken into the body will have its effect upon the body. And there's just no way to get around that. And we have to recognize that there may be some harmful side effects and pitfalls from taking animal substance into our bodies. But that's the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the medications? Take half a mature green pawpaw, blend the skin, flesh, and seeds with other fruits to make a pleasing smoothie. Take this enzyme drink at least 2 times a day. Now, is there anybody in this room who still does not know how to make the pawpaw smoothie? You don't. Okay. All right. Okay, first of all, you're using the green pawpaw. Okay? Mature green. It's not so green that the seeds inside are white. Okay? They're like brown or black, brownish black, the seeds inside. But the outside is green. Maybe it has a little bit of stripes of yellow. Okay? And it depends on the variety, too. And then for 1 glass, I'd say I'd use about a quarter of the pawpaw. And then I put in a fair amount of juice. I use coconut juice, but if you can't get coconut juice, you can use any kind of juice. But ultimately, if you can squeeze the juice right on the spot, it's better. And then I put in avocados, bananas, whatever fruit is in season at that time, and just blend that thing up. Now, you leave the skin on, and you leave the seeds in, and you leave the flesh. The whole fruit, yeah, the whole thing, the skin, the flesh, and the seeds. And you just blend it and drink it, and that's it.
I was up in Rarotonga in my little study where I'm very happy when I have a nice little hole there to crawl into and do my studying and whatever I have to do quietly while Anita's answering the phone. But anyway, while I was there one morning, I was doing my meditation. And it felt perfectly good that day, and the meditation moved into the golden light. And I was very, very happy with this beautiful, beautiful golden light that just filled my entire consciousness. Then it focused into a kind of a beautiful little circle surrounded by violet. So I looked at that and said, my, how beautiful. And then to my delight and surprise, a beautiful tree, the pawpaw or papaya tree, came right in and is the most beautiful tree I have ever seen in my life. And then the voice spoke out and said this, live where the pawpaw thrives, for your temporal salvation in the years to come. And I wondered about that. I really wondered about that. And then, of course, we know the importance of the papain, where if we cannot get enzymes shipped from one country to another, we do have the papaya tree, wherein it does have a tremendous amount of the proteolytic enzyme in the form of the papain. And it has amylase and it has lipase to some degree. But it's one of the most powerful plants which has extra enzymes to help to correct long-standing enzyme deficiencies in our body. Especially, we do know, to correct protein digestion and so on. It's wonderful. We know about the leaf of the papaya and how it is used properly. If you boil it for about 3 hours, you have this marvelous, marvelous material that's a little bit tasty, and you drink it, and it'll help the cancers in your body to be healed. But it has to be done on a consistent basis. The pawpaw is something here that I look at and think about. It grows quickly after you plant it. In 9 months, you have a full crop of pawpaws. That's exciting to me. But live where the pawpaw thrives, for your temporal salvation in the years to come. I don't question that. There are many different types of pawpaws. There's the mountain pawpaw in northern New Zealand. There's pawpaws that are crossed that come from South America that they're now expanding in many, many gardens now in New Zealand. I wonder about the people in places like Melbourne and Sydney and so on, where they cannot get the pawpaw to grow because they have a certain amount of a cold climate there. I worry about some of the other cities to the far north, in the northern hemisphere, where for about 7 months out of the year you have a lot of snow and frost and so on. And that, of course, kills the pawpaw. I remember very distinctly at a time when Twyla Nitsch, who was the medicine lady for the Seneca Indian Nation, she's a very beautiful, very wise lady. She's quite elderly by now. But she told me in the future, in the dreams and visions that she has had, that the time will come when, because of the conditions that fill the earth, the only thing that we will be able to live on will be roots and barks. Now just put that into your little halter there and think about it for a while. Roots and barks. And she said that's all that will be. And she says that's all that will be available, because we'll have conditions that will destroy everything else in the atmosphere and on the earth. And so roots and barks, you should become very avidly studying that to find out what does that really mean. And then what's going to be happening in the, shall we say, the equatorial areas where you have your tropics, shall we say, like up here in northern Queensland, for example. Other countries around the equator. If there's just simply barks and roots, we know the minerals are there, but this might put us in some terrible, terrible situation. Now, conditions may change if we have sufficient change of consciousness, which is what we're all hoping for. But I think this is something we should look at, because this pawpaw is, don't take this for granted as just another herb. This is a life-giving herb.
Again, if you're wanting to become pregnant, I would go off of this for that time, because you have the seeds in there, and also the papain could abort the baby. So this would be something for the mother to have after she has the child. Okay, now we're moving on to the Schweitzer formula. The normal dosage on the Schweitzer formula is 2 tablespoons 3 times a day. That's what we recommend. Now, if you have any scars on the body, you can spray it on every single day, and the scars should disappear. Varicose veins, very good for varicose veins. Some people have little spider veins on their face, very good for that. It helps to build the immune system. Any problem with the immune system, flu, colds, anything like that, take the Schweitzer on a regular basis. I'm talking about the American one, which is equal to your dessert spoon, I believe. Yeah. So it's 2 dessert spoons 3 times a day. Sorry. Oh, okay.
I really wasn't going to put it on tape. I just asked Doug. After the woman's had the child like that and she's nursing or anything, if you're taking papaya again, will that affect the milk or the child or anything like that? And how long after childbirth can they go back on taking it?
It won't affect the mother at all. It won't affect the child at all. What it will do is will increase the immune system. And this is what we find, that when papain is taken into the system on a regular basis, that the immune system soars.
Just one thing in general on pregnancy as well as nursing. The period of pregnancy is not a good time for the mother to go on a heavy cleansing program, because all the toxins getting thrown off like that would have a very bad effect upon the developing baby. So the woman should be on not a heavy program during the pregnancy. And to some extent during breastfeeding, you got to be a little bit careful not to do too heavy of a cleansing, because the baby is going to be affected by whatever the mother's doing. And we've seen this with both of our children, where occasionally if Mag varies her program a little bit and she goes into a little bit of a cleanse and she's breastfeeding, that it's quite obvious the effects upon the kids. I don't think that's necessarily bad in that sense, but you do have to be careful, because the baby, the the quality of the milk is definitely going to vary a lot depending on what's going on in the mother's body.
It would be wise to point out that Dr. Edward Carl, in his work with the hyperbaric chamber, which is compressed oxygen, like you find in your diver's equipment, the hyperbaric chamber for pregnant women is absolutely marvelous. And the kids come out with the oxygen that has permeated their brain for all during pregnancy. The kids will have an IQ of 150 to 200. They're absolutely marvelous and bright from the time they're born because there has been no suffering from oxygen deprivation of the brain. Now, for you women folk and you men folk, get this information down so you understand it. During pregnancy, a woman who is pregnant should stay completely away from all sexual activity. Because if there is any sexual activity where an orgasm takes place, the orgasm, when it takes place, it places the blood in an area away from that which feeds the brain, and the child suffers from oxygen deprivation, which to some degree destroys their mental acuity and their mental development. Now, a man, if he had any sense whatsoever, he would simply control his sexual habits and take care of that woman when she's pregnant and make no demands upon her whatsoever, not to stimulate her in any way, but simply put your arms around that beautiful woman who's carrying your child and hold her, take care of her and love her, and make sure you raise that child and the mother at that time like you'd raise a calf in the stall. Keep that mother and the child away from any type of stress factors which could damage the unborn child. Oftentimes when we have a child who has had traumas of a psychological or physical nature during the 9 months in the womb, then those things will have an effect upon that child's life forever. And unless we get them into body electronics and are able to retrace it or able to, what's the word I want to use, re-experience, retrace, unravel that situation. And there's ways of doing this. But the thing is, don't have any sexual relations of any kind during pregnancy. Otherwise, the unborn child will be affected. Yes, sir.
Is it the orgasm that's bad or sexual relations?
Well, the sexual relations leads to orgasm. Then you need a little, you need a little bit of saltpeter to slow you down, because the woman shouldn't be tantalized in any way during this time. And the thing is just remember this: if you're not going to have sex for reproduction, then consider putting it on the shelf for a while, giving that woman who is already pregnant a chance for that child to grow properly without being tantalized by some male who takes after the big famous jackrabbit who said, "You're going to like this, did you?" Okay, and this is how most men are. "You're going to like this, did you?" And that's something to consider. Yes.
I'm trying to think of where to begin. I realize in the body, basically, I've been perplexed by the whole oxygenation concept that we've been talking about for a while. And my main concern is, I guess, from my knowledge in nursing, and I know that I'm coming from a different perspective sometimes with that, but I've seen many people and patients that have an oxygen saturation in their blood of well over 95%. And that's even people that have major respiratory problems. So I'm trying to rationalize or understand how something, I mean, as wonderful as an orgasm, but as minimal in the body, that how low that could take your oxygen saturation in your blood. It doesn't seem like it would have a detrimental effect because your body is so able to reach homeostasis. It's so able to adjust in that I couldn't see how that could damage brain cells, I guess.
It damages the brain cells of the fetus, not you, but the brain cells of the fetus, because the fetus is the brain of the fetus. The blood is withdrawn at that time from the fetus to the sexual organs, and the fetus is deprived of oxygen during that particular problem, or the orgasm.
There is a book on the subject. It's called Sex and the Unborn Child. Sex and the Unborn Child, and it's a Dr. Kelly, isn't it? I'm a bit at a loss for the author's name, but that's the exact title, Sex and the Unborn Child, and I believe it's a medical doctor that wrote it. And it's it's in paperback and all the rest, so you might want to try to find that, because I haven't read it for probably 8 or 9 years, so I couldn't really, I don't have the facts there at this point either.
And then I was wondering too, along with that, since we're on the oxygen, is since most of us are on a level, I mean, at least from what I've seen in my experience, most of us are over 95% oxygen saturated. I'm trying to understand, since we can't exceed 100% saturation, how the oxygen supplement comes in to play, like how that really benefits us, or I don't know.
We're going to talk later on oxygen.
I don't know where this 95% came from.
That is with a lot of people who are into aerobics, yogic breathing and so on, living in Colorado, for example, where you have, like Boulder, where you have a lot of good fresh air. And the people there, a lot of them do have high oxygen levels. But you go to Merrillville or South Chicago or Tokyo or places like that, and people their oxygen level in the bloodstream is way low.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have thrown out the 95% without explaining where that was coming from. Basically what that is when you hook up a patient to what's called a pulse oximeter, and it's a little thing that you put on the end of your finger that basically reads how much oxygen you have in your blood at that moment. And so most of us would read over 95%, like if you were sitting here. And most of us would read probably 99%. But someone, yeah, I mean, so it's in Colorado, Wisconsin, wherever, in New Zealand, Australia. Even someone who has COPD or an extreme asthma. I took care of a child once who could hardly even get her breath, and I would have to do a treatment if she went below 90%. And so even with her chronic, asthma, she was above 90%. So I see where, if we get below 85, that there's complications. But since I haven't seen many people get below that, that's what I guess I'm trying to figure in through my head.
We have. So perhaps you better check out your equipment, your testing equipment, and see if it's accurate, because not too many people are above 90% according to our findings. Sometimes if a person has over 90% oxygen level, then the doctors are wondering, what are you doing, So this is, so check the equipment, and there may be an adjustment that needs to be made.
Well, it would strike me that if you're dealing with percentages and you're making comparisons from one person to another, and the thing that I don't have the technical background in it that you have, but it's just like, insurance companies make actuarial tables of height and weight, and as the population gets more and more obese, they simply just change the numbers every 10 or 20 years, and what used to be considered overweight for a certain height 30 years ago is now just sort of considered normal. And so the point I would make is that average, shall we say, isn't necessarily normal or healthy. And so we look at the iris and the sclera of the eye, and we see practically everyone with obvious, blue rings and things, which we'll get into next week, showing oxygen deficiency. And if you realize that that's virtually everybody you come across, well, if you're comparing the person that you're testing to everyone else, yes, they'll come out as average, meaning they're just as screwed up as everybody else is.
Yes, can you come up, please? Keith?
Just a little question about the blood. If you're measuring in the blood, does that mean it's necessarily the same in the tissues? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah.
You answered it.
Okay. All right, getting back to the Schweitzer. Also, we use it for sunburns. Now, we went into niacin yesterday. Also, niacin, after you start taking niacin, you don't burn anymore. Now, make sure you do this for a while, because some people go out there after the first time of taking niacin and think they're not going to burn, and it just doesn't happen. So you have to be on the niacin for quite a while before you stop burning. Any questions on the niacin? I think we covered it yesterday. And the Schweitzer, it's good to put the Schweitzer on when you're having that flush, so it really seeps into the tissues and really gets that immune system working.
On the multi-B vitamin we're supposed to take, how many milligrams are that we're supposed to take? And do we take it when we take the niacin for the flush, or how does that work?
Okay, now the next we have here is a sample program that we put the person on, and we'll go through the dosages. That this is just for a normal adult, okay? Now, there's going to be little changes according to the severity of the case, maybe the weight of the person, if it's a child, whatever. So I'm going to give for a normal adult, this is the dosages we use. Okay, for the food enzymes, if you're using the Ness, it's enzyme number 2. If you're using the Ness brand, if you're in Enzyme International, it's food enzymes, and it's 2 enzymes with each meal, 3 times a day. The powder enzymes? Doug, what's the dosage on the powder?
With the Enzymes International powder, a U.S. teaspoon, which is a bit bigger than what you have here, a level one is about the same as 4 capsules. A level American teaspoon is roughly the same as 4. The teaspoon in the United States is bigger than the teaspoon down here. But a level, if you take 4 capsules, say of the Enzymes International enzymes, and you take them out of the capsule and put them on a spoon and whatnot, 4 capsules is approximately equal to a level American teaspoon, so it'd be, say, a rounded, teaspoon down here, I suppose, slightly rounded.
Is that what you're taking, 4 capsules? On the food enzymes? Okay, on the Enzyme International, you're taking 4 to 6. I've been using the Ness, so we're taking... Okay. All right, so everyone get that? On the Enzyme International, they're using 4 to 6 per meal, capsules per meal. On the Ness, we're using 2 per meal, 3 times a day. The tablet would have a tableting agent, I would assume.
I have always questioned the tableting procedure, because any time that you tablet something, the compression factor has a high heat factor, and you have a problem there. The only one that works is where you have a triple press, which is a low compression, low temperature technique, very slow technique, where you go through 3 separate presses to end up with 1 press of a normal tablet. And that is not economically feasible.
Okay, the lipase enzyme, or number 18 in the Ness formula, that's 2 capsules 3 times a day with food. And it's good to take these right when you start eating, so they start getting activated. And I think the point we brought up the other day is very important. You might want to break them open and eat them so the body knows it's coming down there. The enzyme international lipase, that's also 2-3 times a day. Oh.
I'm just looking at my notes from earlier, Anita. I see I've got marked here with the lipase. You said with meal in the book. But I have with my book, the lipase should be taken with the linseed oil and flax oil, I'm sorry. Yeah, half an hour before meals. Yeah, take the lipase tablets with the oil. So you don't take it with the oil. Okay, right on.
Yeah, so the lipase acts with the flax oil, okay? It helps to break down the flax oil. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the 18 or the lipase enzyme with the flax oil with the meal. So, okay, the lipase is 2 capsules 3 times a day. And the flax oil varies according to your health. You can go from 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons 3 times a day, depending on your cholesterol level and your health.
If you have any question, take more. Because there's no contraindication from taking too many of the enzymes. And this is what, you don't worry about 4, 3 times a day at mealtime, or shall I take 2, 3 times a day at mealtime. What you're interested in is correcting the long-standing deficiencies in the body. And frankly, I've mentioned earlier, kind of in jest a little bit about what some people have done, but the more enzymes they take, the faster the body adjusts back to where the body has no longer an enzyme deficiency, and then the body proceeds to go through one healing crisis after another. You may want to slow it down, then slow down your enzyme intake. But you don't want to do that forever, because then you don't get to the perfection of correcting all of the long-standing deficiencies you've had and get through the healing crisis. That's what's important.
Okay, so it's important to understand that lipase is going with the flax oil. Some people are taking like flax oil and orange juice and things because they're having a hard time getting it down with the food. I personally put it on the salad with a little lemon. So, and I can take it straight too, but if you're having trouble, you might want to put it into something else. In a smoothie, yes.
I see so many people wilting on the vine out here, folks. I know we had a hard night, and I know there's been a lot of healing crisis. Why don't you take about a 15-minute break, get out and move around so the ankles don't swell, which some of you are complaining of. Get out and move around and have a coconut or two.
Questions on my break while I was getting my coffee was if you're taking the food enzymes and the lymphatic enzymes and you have a serious condition, do you need the protease enzyme? The answer to that is yes. You do need that for extra support there. Okay? For people with serious conditions like cancer, etc., I would take the food enzymes, lymphatic enzymes, and then the proteolytic enzymes. Okay? Okay. Now, also another question.
One question that was posed to me is, do you need the proteolytic enzymes if you're taking the pawpaw? Now, having had terminal cancer about 12 years ago, when I was 50, I had bone cancer, and I nearly died, and I was in pain. Now, I would have died if I didn't have people forcing me to take the supplementation, which I didn't want. I didn't want it at all because it made me sick, made me vomit, it made me throw up, made me run at the bowels and so on. I didn't want it all. But because people forced me for about a month to have my supplementations, I survived. I'm grateful forever for that. You hearing me? Okay, now don't be kind to somebody and say, oh dear, I know it makes you sick, but the thing is you have to have it. And you know, don't get mamby-pamby. Say, hey, if you want to survive a few more years and see your grandkids, then take this damn stuff. Pardon my French. But get forceful on the matter and do it. No holds barred. Because it's a matter of life and death, and if you do it halfway, you're not going to survive if you have terminal cancer. I've been there. And I know how painful it is, and I know how hard it is. And you're just going to have to do it. Okay? Yes, sir.
My question, when you take the protease and the lymphase, is it possible to take them out of the capsules and just chuck them down?
This is how Anita does it.
Yeah, you can take them out of the capsule. Take it down right with the food. Not hot food, though. It's got to be cold food.
You said with the food, I thought the protease and the lymphatics, not lipase. You're supposed to take it on the empty stomach?
Let's look at the facts involved. If we follow a schedule and tell a person to take the lymphatic enzymes 1/2 hour before meals, and they're busy, they're going to miss it 90% of the time. Have them take it with the meal, and that which is used for helping to digest everything up the way it ought to, the rest will end up in the small intestine and go where it has to go and do the job of cleaning out the lymphatic enzymes. So you have a double purpose there of complete digestion of everything in your gut. The rest of it will go into the bloodstream and clean out the mucoprotein. Don't make an issue out of it. And yet a lot of people will argue and fuss about when do you take it. Take the whole lot right when you eat, you're going to be all right. Okay? Otherwise, you're just doing this. 5 minutes later, you take that. 5 minutes later, you take that. And after a while, you don't have time to live.
Yes. Okay, the other question was, how can you take fruit 3 times a day? Is that right? And the only way you can you can have it half an hour before the meal. So, or in between the meal. Instead of having your coffee break, have your mango or your watermelon or whatever in between the meal. That's the only way I could see you can do it. If you want to have it for breakfast and then the other 2 meals free, you'd have to have a sufficient amount to do that. I find that my brain gets very funny when I do that, though, and I need a carbohydrate.
How much would be a sufficient amount?
At least 3 pieces of fruit. And depending on the type of fruit, I mean, you know, it'd have to be like 3 big pieces of fruit.
Can one take the lymphatic enzymes in the morning and in the evening? I don't know where I got that from, but that's what we've been doing. Or is it not totally incorrect?
In the morning and in the evening without food?
If you take them in the evening, you'll be up all night, you'll have wild dreams, you'll have this and that, you'll have to get up and relieve yourself 3 or 4 times with the lymphatic enzymes. Yes? You understand? So take them in the morning, take them at noon, and give yourself a good sleep at night.
And also the minerals. If you take the minerals at night, you have really clear, vivid dreams.
Real good dreams. The minerals, take them just before you go to bed at night, and you have a lovely, lovely trip all night long. You don't want to get up in the morning because that's a good one.
Dream world is better. Okay, the other thing is Ken offered, he just suggested that since we have coconuts here, you can put the coconut in your smoothies in the morning. And also what I do in the Cook Islands, I use that meat inside. If you have something to get the meat out, you can put the meat in the blender, the meat of the coconut, and that makes a really good smoothie also. Okay, now moving on to the proteolytic enzyme, take 2 capsules of enzyme number 416, or the protease, with each meal. 2 capsules with each meal. And you should really have the enzymes when you start to eat. Another person came up and asked if they could have their supplements a half an hour before their meal. Well, the enzymes are really there to help digest the food, so I think the best time is right when you start to eat, just start taking the supplements right along with it. Okay. Now, with the colloidal minerals, we have several options here. We have coenzymes from Enzyme International. The regular dosage is...
What we've done in the past in the States, if you go back historically with the capsules, John used to say about 1 capsule for every 14 pounds of body weight per day was saturation, which would be about a capsule for every stone for you folks down here, and it'd be about a capsule for, I suppose, about every 6 or 7 kilos. What we found over the years is that the amount of minerals that people have needed, it has seemed to decline in 2 different ways. Overall, collectively, it seems like we're getting more results with less minerals than we used to. But also individually, as you stay in a program for a long time, you seem to get much better results with less minerals than you started. So a lot of people on the Enzymes International minerals, if they've been on minerals for a long time, do quite wonderfully on 3 or 4 capsules a day. They do fine on that. But for somebody starting out, they might want to do the saturation, which might be up around 10 caps or more throughout the day.
And if you want a real intense point holding, to up your dosage of minerals.
We had one very fine naturopathic physician, a good friend to Body Electronics. His name is Dr. Mike McCammon. He took 80 of the Mount Morellinite Nature Sunshine Mineral Maintenance. He took 80 of them before he had a point holding in a session such as this. And he ended up roasting about 16 people. And everybody had their fingers plugged into every single endocrine point, heart point, chest point, head point, any up the nose, wherever we could find an opening. And, not really. But the thing was, with 16 people, everyone was plugged in. And it was like they're plugged into electric circuit. Now, this young gentleman had black sand all the way around zone 6 in both eyes, and very, very, very heavy. The electricity was absolutely profound, and he roasted everybody, and people were just crying, because the jolting that was going on. When he was done, his eye was as clear as can be. His mucoprotein cleared out. His black sand in that area cleared out. And he was just feeling absolutely wonderful, and he had about 16 half-dead people lying around, who had been electrocuted immensely by that 80 units. I think he was on for about 12, 14 hours. And we just kept going. And we just kept going because we chose to, not because we had to. But we wanted to see what would happen with some guy loading down with about 80 capsules or 80 tablets of this Mount Morellinite. But the tremendous change. Now, we've had other people who take the regular dosage, and we got no results on him until we took the Min Plus. We took about 3 dessert spoons, heaping in a glass of water 3 times a day for a couple of days, and then we just loaded up on him just before we did the cranial work. And I'll tell you, we had one of the best cranials you ever saw in your life. He just roasted and burned and changed, and bone structures popping away and going through it, and we made our breakthrough. Don't underestimate taking too many minerals, because you're going to have a wonderful results. Uh-oh, I did it now. But where's Brooke? 5 times the normal amount that he's been taking, which is 5 times what an average person takes. But the thing is that's what's happened, and it's fun. So the thing is you wonder, well, how much do you take? I don't know anymore. I don't have an answer anymore. I would say be reasonable and then tank up really good before you have your points held.
Okay, and then we also have Nature Sunshine Mineral Maintenance, which we normally put a person on 5 3 times a day. If you're taking that brand. Okay, any other questions on minerals? 5 3 times a day of the Nature Sunshine Mineral Maintenance. That's in New Zealand. You're in the States, yeah. You would, yeah, Nature Sunshine, or you could use the Enzyme International. Oh, okay.
So is it generally recommended now that we don't decant the Min Plus, that we just take it straight?
Some people still decant that Min Plus, but remember the end result is about a half of the strength of the Enzymes International, about half of a capsule in 1 liter. And we have people still getting good results on that, on the decanted liquid. They still get good results even with the point holding. Now, Anita will disagree with me on this, but for a while I'll take 3 serving spoons, dessert spoons, pardon me, 3 dessert spoons heaping in a glass of water 3 times a day. Okay, that's what I do. And then without decanting it. And I've never had trouble with it. You heard the gentleman today who is here saying how he's taken about 2 teaspoons heaping 3 times a day in a glass of water, and he's done that for 10 years and has no problems with it whatsoever. Other people have done the same thing. There's no problems whatsoever. We had it tested down in Nerang by a gentleman. What's his name? Graham Grigg. Now, Graham Grigg, he tested this material and found it to be totally non-toxic. He had equipment which I don't fully understand, which is about $500,000 worth of equipment, and checked it through for toxicity, and there was none. Just something to consider.
I've taken the Enzymes International minerals for about 10 or 11 years now and gotten consistently good results with them. One of the things I've noticed in the last year is that in using some of the Min Plus in conjunction with the Enzymes International minerals, that a lot of times it'll throw me into a real good healing crisis. And I suspect that when you look at the 3 different types of minerals, that they're all going to have slightly different spectrums of the different trace elements and all the rest. So you might get some real good results if you combine a couple kinds of minerals. You know, whether you're taking the Enzymes International or the mineral maintenance, throw in some Min Plus with it, and I think you'll probably get some better results than you were already getting.
Ruth.
If a person has a serious condition like cancer, would you suggest taking the Min Plus straight to them?
Well, I was taking it straight. I believe it has to do with the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. See, now I was taking it straight, and I had some side effects, but then I had rheumatoid arthritis, and my hydrochloric acid level, I believe, is very low. So I decided that I cannot take it straight. And I've had other people who had similar side effects as I did. Now, there's hundreds of people who have taken it straight, and there's no problem with it. So,
tongue-in-cheek. When it happens to us, it's side effects. If it happens to other people, it's healing crisis.
well, I would say experiment with it, Ruth. Experiment. If you want to try it, you may be fine, with it. Just give it a go. I was taking a tremendous amount. I was taking about 4 tablespoons in a glass of water 3 times a day, because I really wanted to make sure there was nothing wrong with it when we first got it.
And what happened? Which organ? Kidneys. And when we were in Sri Lanka, you know, I woke up in the middle of the night and my back was just burning off. I thought somebody had a blowtorch in it, and it was her. And I couldn't get far enough away from her because wherever I went in the room, this huge ballooning amount of radiation was just more than I could possibly tolerate. And I was getting burned up with this radiation. And her back was just absolutely like you had your hand on a hot stove. And now the radii solaris are gone right down through the kidney adrenal area, and she has had no back pain since that time. Is that correct? That's correct. Good. Those minerals did her a world of good. And so when I joke with her and I tell her that these symptoms that she gets from it is not a side effect, that's healing crisis. But we all feel differently about our own healing crisis, and we're well assured. No, it's not a healing crisis because I really hurt, you know.
I don't know about that. But take into consideration that I was taking a very high dosage, so, and normally you wouldn't be taking that much. So, all right, let me see. Now, we skipped the psyllium. I was going to say to John, when you came up before John Sear, you might want to go off the psyllium for a while and then go back on it, because sometimes you need to take a break on that for a while. On it, okay? Any questions on psyllium? Psyllium you could get in the health food store, or you just take it depending on your problem, but normally we put a person on about 2 teaspoons in water or juice in the morning and at night if they need it. And drink quickly because it goes into like a jello type consistency. I don't know if the Aussies know what that is. Jello? Yeah? Jelly. Okay, jelly. Okay, any questions on psyllium? All right. Acidophilus. Well, I think we covered that yesterday.
Hold on. Psyllium, it helps to clean and scrape away the old mucus linings and the junk on the inside of the intestine. It helps to give bulk to the intestine to where you have good, firm peristaltic action.
For people who take psyllium and find that they're getting bound up rather than the opposite, it's usually because they're not having enough water. So if you're having psyllium, make sure you have at least 500 mils at the time you take it, and generally keep your water up. I wonder if that might help John.
That's a good suggestion, David.
I'll stop for a second. Okay. Is there anybody, where's Christabel? Okay, Christabel was making arrangements for the gentleman down in Cairns who everyone liked for colonic therapy up here at Genazzano. Does anybody up here want to have a colon therapist come up here? Because some of you are pretty well plugged up and you don't know what to do about it. It could be lack of exercise. Now, you've been getting a lot of mental exercise, but you haven't been getting physical exercise. We had about, how many hands again? I counted about 6 or 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, we got 17 people with their hands up, maybe a few more, and maybe with a good colonic or two, this might get the brain moving. Okay, so would you tell Christabel we've got 17 willing candidates? Normally it's about $40. I think this is down in a group situation. It'll be around $30, I think, and that's a pretty good price for a full professional colonic. And this guy is really a professional. Pardon me? You work it out. He's very willing to work with us.
He wants to come up here and do it, so he'll be working right within the toilet facilities.
And I think arrangements were made for the for the location down here for the wheelchair patients, where they have facilities here where he can set up his clonic equipment. Is that right, Lewis? Checking it out, it has to be looked at. Would you be opposed to that, sir? Pardon me, Chris? Okay. If we put you first priority and he knew that, then he just simply has to push the schedule down. Would that be all right with you? What I'm saying is, if we put you as first priority to use the bathroom, that after you had first priority and claim on that, and then he'd have to just kind of adjust his schedule accordingly, because you'd have first priority. Would that be reasonable for you? Pardon me? Yeah. If you could work that out, would you talk to Christabel on the matter? Okay, very good. Now remember, you don't need to do that unless you want to. Okay? That's your choice, because that's your room. Now he'll have to make other arrangements, but that's your room. You don't have to do that. I don't want you to feel forced to do that in any manner, shape, or form. Pardon me? They'll have to work that out.
Okay, we'll work that out and get back to you on that. Okay, well, acidophilus, I think we handled that all day yesterday with Alan. Is there any other question on acidophilus? I think we exhausted that subject.
I think I'd better talk some more on a very important subject. We all stand up, please. Now, one thing that's very, very interesting is the ileocecal valve. There is a very interesting pressure point which you find on the muscle structure that goes up and down the side of the leg. What is that muscle called? The fascia lata. Now, if you stand at perfect attention and put your hand down to your side and take your third finger and press it into the fascia lata on the right side, stand at attention and press in. Do you find a sore spot there? That sore spot is definitely the reflex point to the... You have to move it around about the size of a quarter. When you find that, that is the definite reflex point to the ileocecal valve, wherein most people's ileocecal valves are open because the cecum is usually full of old dog biscuits. That's what I call them, because that's what they look like when they come out through the tube, if you got a tube to view them when they come by. Now, these old dog biscuits set up as old fecal matter down in what we call the cecum, which is on, for most people, on the lower right-hand side. If your bodies are reversed, and some people's are, you'll find it on the lower left-hand side. And this is where the colon therapist realizes about 1 out of every 50,000 people will be reversed in the positioning of their colon. And for that matter, all of the other organs of the body. Now, on the right-hand side, way down low, is the cecum. It's a cesspit full of toxins. It's a cul-de-sac full of old, dirty junk, which is continually flooding toxins into the body. And because of the hardened nature of all this junk in that cecum, okay, it pulls open the anterior lip of the ileocecal valve, where all the toxins from the colon go on up into the small intestine, kill out the acidophilus, and gives you bad breath and burping and things like this, as some of you are bothered with. Have a seat. Take your ileocecal valve with you, please. Okay. Now, that's very, very important to you, okay? Because if that anterior lip of the ileocecal valve is open, you're never going to be digesting food. You're always going to be bloated in here in the small intestine area, and you'll feel literally, you'll just feel terrible all the time. Now, this we have to work with. Now, when you get that cecum cleaned out, and you have a cecum dump, which a good, skilled colon therapist will be able to get, you'll feel all of this stuff coming out with the thumping peristaltic action all the way from your ileocecal valve, all the way from your cecum, and you feel like hot, rushing water coming out of there. You feel like somebody turned on the hot water, and it's really burns for a while if you've never had a cecum dump. After you've had your first cecum dump, you'll never have it again. So that first time, really treasure that experience. And that's everything is hot and heated when it comes out of there. But that cecum's very, very important to get cleaned and to have a good colonic irrigation. These are something that many people just disregard, and people are sick all the time because they have never had this particular cecum cleaned out. Now you take a look carefully at your iridology charts, and you see where the reflexes from the cecum go, and you find out why so many people have problems, because death begins in the colon. Yes, sir.
I was wondering whether large amounts of grain fields would possibly have the same effect.
Has it had that effect for you, sir? It hasn't for me either. Well, but we've got about a half hour more for the food crew. Okay, we'll be here for about 1/2 hour, and we'll be done at 6:30.
Okay. B vitamins. Okay, now John has a specially formulated a B vitamin from Mega Vitamin Labs, VitaFit, also it's called, and the normal dosage on this is 1 capsule 2 times a day.
For people into body electronics, you're going to use up tremendous amounts of B complex, and this is important for you. And if you're deficient in B complex, the body won't heal. We've had some people that never get a burn until they tank up, shall we say, on B complex, and suddenly now we get this burning, searing pain through the body, and that was the one thing that was holding them back from getting that fire of the Kundalini. This is why nutritional preparation in a nutrient saturation is absolutely essential.
This particular B complex that John has had formulated, it is a synthetic B vitamin, and in the past basically from when I started studying with John, 10 years ago, I've always been, not used synthetic vitamins for anything, of course, particularly not the synthetic vitamin C. And what I did see last year was there were a number of people who, much to my surprise at first, seemed to benefit quite a lot from taking this particular B complex. There were 2 or 3 people here in the instructors courses who'd never had any burning whatsoever, and then as soon as they added this VitaFit B vitamin, they did get some good results with it. Later on in the week, we're probably going to spend a little bit of time talking about muscle testing and relative levels of balance. There will be some individuals who have gotten to a high enough level of health where they will no longer test well on the synthetic B vitamin, on any synthetic B vitamin. So you have to be a little bit careful here. I think, has that happened to you? Is that my understanding? Peter?
I think if we're ever lucky enough to get high in vibration, all synthetic material will drop out. That's the law of nature.
Because of the nature of our experience, some of us will need something of a synthetic nature where we can't find it in large enough amounts any other place on earth. So remember, don't drive your stakes in so deep that you can't pull them back out again. Oftentimes we have to understand, and I've had to have egg on my face several times and had to backtrack on things, and because there's a time, place, and purpose for all things under heaven. Even B12 shots, which I used to fight against, but some people have to have that B12 to keep them alive, or B6 shots, okay?
Do we there some good food sources available to us here that we could get some good B vitamins in? I mean, natural source?
I haven't found any.
Brown rice has a lot of good, organically grown, good brown rice, if you can find it. Has a lot of good B vitamins. Your Vegemite has very little, but it does have some B vitamins, Vegemite and Marmite. And it has about 2 milligrams of niacin in it. In the wheat germ is rancid. That used to be a good source way back in the health days, the health hippies.
About 3 or 4 hours after you mill the wheat and get for the wheat germ, or even wheat germ oil, it begins to grow rancid. And we have a problem there.
Oh, bee pollen, yes, bee pollen. Very good in B vitamins.
I was just wondering when the synthetic B vitamins drop out, what can you take to do your niacin flush with? Or will the niacin flushing be, by that time, will that be completed? Because you need a B complex along with the niacin, especially at the higher doses.
I no longer have an answer for that, because every time I start to come to an understanding, I find out that is countered by other factors.
The past year for me, since coming out, I had not taught a seminar with John in about 6 years before I came out here last January to teach again. And the last year for me has been a process or shall we say, reversing a lot of positions that I've had. I found myself in the last 12 months starting to eat eggs again after about 10 or 12 years, starting to eat fish again, and doing a lot of things, starting to drink beer again on occasion, and all sorts of things that I hadn't done in a long time. And I've found that all of these things have actually benefited my health. So I've certainly gotten a little bit less black and white in some areas, not all yet. But one of the things that on the niacin flush, I've used the niacin from over in the States, which is a synthetic, as all niacins are to my understanding. I mean, at least there's not a high-dose natural niacin. And I've always just used the Enzymes International B complex, which is natural but very, very low milligram dose. And I've never had any trouble getting niacin flushes. So I don't think you got anything to worry about there.
I have a list here of foods with niacin, and the highest is rice bran. Rice bran has a lot of niacin in it.
If anybody wants to see it, I'm not going to have Anita read this to you, but it's just a lot of stuff you might want to look at that you can get from any type of B-complex food book.
Yes, Ermgard.
I love brown rice very much, but it has to be cooked. Or do you recommend to mill it and to eat it raw?
No, it's a cooked food, and that's why we're taking B vitamins. But occasionally, you eat some cooked food also.
A vitamin, by definition, is a biologically active compound that the body can't produce itself. And the thing to realize is that a lot of the definitions we have are based on, shall we say, average individuals in a poor state of health. And one of the things to consider with respect to B vitamins is that if you take an individual who's in very, very good health, and in particular an individual whose gut is very, very well endowed with all of the necessary microorganisms, that you're probably going to find that an individual in that sort of state it wouldn't really be the individual, but the microbes within that individual would actually synthesize a tremendous amount of B vitamins. And so I suspect that would be the long-term answer. When you get to a high enough level of health, your body's going to, within the body, the microbes are going to do most of the work for you there as far as B vitamins go.
I know I was strongly against the synthetic in the beginning, and when I first met John, I had a lot of mood swings because my pancreas was really in the pits. And finally, I just decided to go on the synthetic B vitamins, and bam, it just evened out, like really even. So, I don't know, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
What we have is we have the picolinic, zinc picolinate, which helps to ease the problems that people have with hypoglycemia. And this zinc picolinate is very, very good for that. It's what they call the glucose tolerance factor and so on. That's all in there so that you have no problems with your blood sugar problems when you're taking this B complex. Now, a lot of people have blood sugar problems, and they'd rather be a purist and be bouncing off the wall twice a day and being down in the pits 1 minute and up into a hypoglycemic fit the next. And they won't take anything because they don't believe in it. But sometimes we have to do something which will help us to get along with other people until the body heals properly, so that we can, so that we don't destroy our children and drive our husband or wife out. You know, there's a time and place and purpose for all these things until we can get ourselves under control. This is important for us.
Okay, lecithin. Now, in
chromium picolinate for the pancreas. There's zinc picolinates in there also.
Okay, lecithin. Now, the lecithin joins with the flax oil to further emulsify the cholesterol out of the blood vessels. And we use this in our oral chelation program. If a person has a really high cholesterol problem, we put them on the flax oil, the lipase, the lecithin, and the niacin, and a high-fiber diet. Of course, a full program, but make sure they're taking those specific things. And so the lecithin depends on the brand, but normally it's only like 1 capsule 3 times a day.
About 1,200 milligrams 3 times a day. It's a great brain food.
1,200 milligrams.
Yeah, I'm worried about the lecithin because at the moment I hear there's a pending case in England where somebody is being sued because lecithin was being given to somebody and it ended up causing an embolism, which resulted in the death of the person. So I don't really know, how do you advise about that?
Let's look at something. You're going to have people die every single day that you're living here. And people die and you'll hear about it. Relatives will die. And we can take, in our short-sightedness, like these people over there who are doing all the suing, they can say it's because they took lecithin. Well, it could have been another cause. It could have been something else. And here's where you have to realize that you're going to have lawsuits, and you're going to have to be very careful as to what you do with people. If somebody dies, somebody's going to get mad and somebody's going to sue you. That's the way it is. And in this day and age, it's getting to be that to where a good doctor will put the patient literally on his own responsibility. And that's where it has to be. It's a matter of educating and letting the person do what he has to do, and even sign a release in some cases, so to avoid any type of litigation in case the person poops the wrong way when he goes into the toilet. Pardon me, but this is what you get. Somebody has a little bit of a diarrhea, and they honestly think that they're going to die for sure, and it's all the doctor's fault because they don't want diarrhea. They get a little cleansing headache, and they don't want a headache, and it's all the doctor's fault. And this is how things are getting to be. Everything that is good for people today is black, and everything that's bad for people is white. And everything is turned upside down in our society today. And so you just have to put your head down and go like the bull and do what you know is right and let the chips fall. You're going to have these crazy things, and people can blame anything for anybody, and you have a nuisance suit and thrown against somebody and a doctor because he has insurance, and then you settle out of court for $500,000.
Okay, we're not recommending the granule lecithin because that also goes rancid very quickly. So we're recommending the capsuled lecithin. 1 capsule 3 times a day, or 1,200 milligrams. Okay, vitamin E. This would put a person with a heart condition on with vitamin E. Depending on the dosage. How much?
That varies, but I will put people on sometimes 800 milligrams 3 times a day if they have a heart condition, which is a lot. But we've had many doctors who have done this, and they've had wonderful results with vitamin E for people with bad heart conditions. For an average problem, it'll be about 400 IUs, shall we say, not milligrams, but 400 IUs 3 times a day. That's international units of your vitamin E.
Okay. Again, make sure that the capsules are not rancid, because sometimes these are put in oils. Okay, beta-carotene. Now, ultimately, the beta-carotene in a tablet, virtually, through the processing, all the nutrient value, I believe, would be gone. So I think the best way to get that would be through carrot juice, organic carrots. Yeah, it's got a really short shelf life, so basically I think if you buy a bottle of beta-carotene, you're just going to be wasting your money. The best thing to do is just make some carrot juice.
There's only one type of natural beta-carotene that I've ever come across that had any sort of shelf life. It was an algae source, what's called a Dunaliella algae from out in Hawaii, and it was quite a high potency. It was about just little tiny capsules that were about 25,000 IUs per capsule. And what they had to do with it is they had to have these little, in each bottle, they had an oxygen absorber packet. And as long as you kept it like that with the lid on and the oxygen absorber packet in it, you could probably get a few months out of a bottle before it would have lost an appreciable amount of potency. But most of the other natural vitamin or beta carotenes that I'm aware of, I've always been told that the shelf life was pretty well nil. Maybe a week or two.
That company is back in business again. Is putting that stuff out one more time with a low temperature freeze dry technique, which is very, very good. And the spirulina we saw recently. And I'm trying to remember the name of it that they have. Yes, sir? That's it. That's right. But it's back in business again. We used to use it until they increased the temperature of the processing, and then we had to just cancel that out because it didn't get the same results on people. But this one is a good one. We've tested it out, and it has wonderful results.
The manufacturer of the spirulina and the beta-carotene is, I believe the company name is still Cyanotech, and that's out in the Big Island. Cyano is like C-Y-A-N-O, Cyanotech, or Cyanotech. And as of 4 or 5 years ago, there was a source of, this all in, because that's like more of a wholesaler, there was a source where you could get the capsules that was in Washington State, and it was called Microlite Enterprises. I don't know if they're still in business, but they were a good source of the capsules. And if I remember right, their number was, it was an 1-800-338-2821. So try that if you're back in the States. 1-800-338-2821 for Microlite, and they were a source of the beta-carotene and the spirulina.
Now, here in Australia, are you aware that the spirulina that they're putting into the formula that Alan Myers has now finally worked out for us? Are you aware that that has in it that same stuff from Hawaii? It's the very best you can get. Alan Myers has done an admirable job to make sure that everything has been processed at low temperatures. And this is by contract. And so he's got the best stuff we can get for the grain fields. Yes, sir. Come up here, sir.
The reason they go down 2 kilometres to get the water is to get unpolluted minerals to grow the spirulina, because the pollution hasn't got down to that level yet.
Plus, also, by getting the water that's that far down, very, very little sunlight reaches, virtually no sunlight reaches that far down, so you basically don't have anything growing in the water. You don't have any other types of algae or anything in the water, so you can get a good pure culture of your spirulina. And the advantage of doing it where they do it on the Kona coast of the Big Island is that you have a very, very deep ocean within about a half a mile of the shore, so you can actually get that kind of water there.
I'm very happy about that. Thank you very much. But right to the north of Maui, where you have that deep trench that follows right around there into the trench there in front of the Kona coastline, you go down there and you have one of the worst and largest nuclear dumps underground water that they have in the world. I just kind of wonder about all these things. Yeah, and that, you go down 4 kilometers, you're right down there in the nuclear dump.
Okay, well... Okay, and right. These are for the amino acids, the spirulina. Of course, low temperature processed, and the bee pollen. The spirulina, we normally put a person on 5 tablets 3 times a day. And the bee pollen, about 1 to 2 tablespoons 3 times a day, depending on problems and weight and how old they are.
Your bee pollen will go anywhere from about 20% protein up to 40% protein, depending upon the source of it. You'll find that the Australian bee pollen is absolutely wonderful, if you can find it. The demand is so great now for the Australian bee pollen that the local people are finding a hard time getting it because of short supply.
Okay,
You can't overindulge on bee pollen, can you?
Some of the most outstanding people I know take, what did our friend from up in, way up in the Yukon, what did he take? The pollen man? He took about a half a pound a day. And he lived on that doggone stuff, and he was just as strong and vital and full of energy, and he's been taking about a half a pound a day for years. So can you overdose? Yes, you probably can. But some people who live on bee pollen swear by it because it gives you the stamina to go through the day, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, most perfect food you can take.
Okay, now there's one other thing here about aluminum. Of course, everyone knows we're not supposed to be cooking in aluminum pots, right? No, we made special provisions to buy stainless steel pots for this seminar. Yeah, for this seminar here. E&Y, have you observed otherwise? Oh, yeah. There are. That's their pots, but we bought pots just so you can have your food cooked in stainless steel. Okay? Okay, also porcelain, of course, and glass is fine, Corningware, things like that. Now, this is the basic program here, what we've gone over. So when we say put them on the program, this is what we're talking about. Does anyone have any other questions? We have about 8 minutes. before we have our fish dinner.
Just a quick one, that vitamin E, was that milligrams or IUs?
Any questions, please?
It's the question about the sensitive leaf tea. Can we reuse everything? The sensitive leaf tea, can we reuse it and extract more goodness out of it second time? The third time, fourth time, etc.?
I've done it. The question is about the sensitive leaf tea. Can you use it? Well, I've used it a couple times, and it seems to be the first boiling doesn't get everything out of it. The second boiling, you still get a good strong tea. It's not quite as what I'll call oily, you know. So there's certain ingredients you're not getting, but you still get a good tea, and it still gives you that little tingling.
Yeah, it should be fairly dark, the color. Somebody came up to me the other day and said that theirs is really light. And no, when I make it, it's pretty dark. It almost looks like a real tea. Because I just leave it on the stove. I put a whole bunch of leaves, I leave it on the stove, and I just keep reheating it and drinking it.
Half an hour? Oh.
About 3 days, and then I throw it out.
Okay, let's talk about one more thing here. May I have your attention, please? This is important. We talked about the sensitive leaf tea, you know, and how it helps the central nervous system and all that. But it's not going to help the central nervous system at all unless we have the right mental attitude. We have had people with a very black pupillary ruff who are into, I have to be in control. We've talked about that earlier today. And what they have done is that when they can let go and let other people be who they are without resisting them, are you hearing me? Let the Father do what the Father does without resisting him. Let the mother do what the mother does without resisting. Let the wife be the divine creature, the delightful deviation from the norm which she is, without resisting her. Let the husband be this remarkable individual that is totally a delightful deviation from the norm, that is true to his heart and shakes everybody up because you can't control him. Right? You love them. You love people just the way they are, and you let things go. You don't try to control and make a person over into what you think they ought to be. Now, we have some people who do that, and they're not willing to receive the beautiful number of wonderful flowers in the garden of life. Now, when a person can receive properly all of the beautiful qualities that are uniquely imbued within every human being, and then be willing to share their own without resistance, then you get that yin-yang attitude together, cause-effect. And all of a sudden, that pupillary ruff will go from black to brown to light brown to an orangish brownish red. We'll call it that. Let's leave the brown out, just kind of an orangish red. And all of a sudden the person is free to be as he is willing to for other people to be free to be. But you have to work at it. You have to let go through the point holding into your genetic stuff and let it go. Okay? Now, you can take as much sensitive leaf tea as you want, and it's got to be done just right. You have to have the right size cup, and you have to have just enough sugar in there. You got to put a little bit of cream with it or milk with it to make it right. And you got to do it at the right time. If you're 2 minutes late, you're all upset because it's not according to schedule. Hey, let all that nonsense go and let it flow. And then that central nervous system will begin to heal because you let go of the rigidity that we have inherited so much from our ancestries. Let it go. And we start having fun. And we don't realize then that everything has to follow an exact order as long as you're on time for my classes. And not a minute late, right? But are you with me on this? There is a certain amount of order in things, but let's enjoy the dance of life without resistance. And then you'll watch that pupillary frail flower. And it's you'll see that very quickly. And I've seen people with black pupillary frills change their lifestyle, and within about 2 or 3 weeks, all of a sudden, that beautiful orangish red comes through. And that has made a whole difference in their life on just letting go, letting other people be their delightful selves. Now, wait. Pardon me? This goes to Paul. For everybody. Yes. Everybody. For everybody. Not with me now. No. I already gave mine to Paul. Yeah. Grab those and take those to Paul. Now, you all wanted that information on the Min Plus, didn't you? And all the different things on the things that Sam had talked about yesterday. Okay, you've got it. We'll just have to get it duplicated for you. Okay, honey, thank you very much. Paul, Doug.
Lil had some interesting experiences last evening, and she also had a suggestion she wanted to make, so...
I don't know whether you are all aware that there was quite a bit of activity, to put it mildly, outside last night. And I was just thinking it might be a good thing for us all to do a decree today just to clear the space of entities. I'm talking about outside and inside, and maybe if we all did it together, it would have a lot more powerful effect.
So you want to explain some of your experience?
Okay. I had an entity... I had just gone to sleep last night, and when you're slipping through from that, wakeful state into a deeper sleep, I don't really know what you call it, from the alpha to the beta or whatever it is. I've had this before, but I woke up with an entity just here, and in the form of just a round ball of light. And when I sort of reacted fairly strongly to it, it went out, and Doug came in and we did an exorcism in the room. And then a little bit later, Dana and I went into the bathroom, and there was one in the bathroom, which we then cleared. It was a very strong one, and very, very cold wind came off it. So, I just think it would be a nice thing if we cleared the area.
Doug, you handle it.
Okay, we're going to do a little decree here, I guess.
This is not normal procedure for the general public, because the general public is absolutely stretched out of shape when you even talk about the possibility of entity involvement. But let's talk very, very frankly for a few minutes. Is everybody here? There are a couple of people missing. Anita, would you get Brooke and Tom in here as quickly as you can? There they are. Now I want you all to listen up, because you need to have this information. Where's Anna? Back there. Okay, Anna, good. You're there hanging through the doorway. All right? I miss Rex. Where's Rex? I couldn't see you. Okay, sir. All right.
Where's Brendan? Brendan back?
Where's Brendan? There you are. Okay, we're all here. Are we on tape? All right. Let's see what happens to the lights. Who's in the kitchen? And that's fine, no problem. Okay. Luke, no problem. Now, folks, I would like you, pardon me? I didn't hear that. They're all here. Okay. Last year we had a couple of people pulled out through walls, and they're halfway through the wall type of thing. We had their roommates were screaming their heads off, and they just said they weren't going to go, and they were pulled them back in, and it's interesting to have these things happen, but it's a little scary for the people who've had that abduction type situation. Okay, this is real stuff, folks. Okay. Okay, you'll hear. Lel said there's some interesting things going on last night with entity involvement. Now, you yourself are fully aware because you had full awareness of one last night yourself. And this is why we're dealing with this, because, you know, spending a lot of time on the ranch as a young boy, we used to have a understanding that if you saw one rat out running around the barn, you know you had 500 underneath. Now, and this is the way that we look at these things. Now, please be tolerant of what I have to say. But this is what we find sometimes with the first time a person does an STO point, which brings nerve supply back into a numb body, where the body has been numbed by trauma, where the body has been numbed by electric shock, where the person has had near-death experiences like in car wrecks, when a person has had an operation and they're put under anesthesia, many times in some cases. Right, Lou? Now, we're not getting personal. We're talking about principles. Now, I want you to just understand, and please, Doug, as you come across your experiences that with me that we've had together, please share your thinking, all right? This is touchy matters, and we're trying to explain that whenever there is anything that happens to a person to numb their particular consciousness. That's right. Who? Who? Okay. Let's wait for Esther to get back. This is such important stuff. I want everyone here. You are now instructors. You have the responsibility of assimilating this information. If you don't believe it, put it on the shelf, and you're entitled not to believe, because for many years I didn't believe many things until finally I found out that certain things I didn't believe I had to reverse myself on, which was quite painful. Hopefully all of you have the integrity that 10 years from now, some of the things that you're hearing now, you may want to reverse your opinions on. We all have the right to our opinions. I have been a great skeptic of many things, and I've, hoo-hawed some people at times when I was a younger fellow, thinking I had a knowledge of things that I didn't have. And I've made grave mistakes in judging people for telling me things that I didn't accept one iota. As a young fellow, I bulled off in my own direction with a very strong-willed attitude. Guess what? We have a class of strong-willed people here. And I think that you share my feelings that oftentimes we think we know, then 10 years later we know that we don't know, and we have to reverse our policies a bit. And 10 years from now, we'll still be reversing some things that we have believed all of our life and we hold as sacred truths, and we find out that it wasn't quite so. It wasn't quite that way. All right? Now, Esther's back. Let's talk about holes in the auric field from every possible aspect. Now, Doug, if I forget something, you fill in my holes here, all right? All right.
I left my aura patch kit down in the room, though.
Okay, just make sure you get your chakra regenerator straightened out here. Okay. A person living in this life, it's a very precarious existence. And let's say that you're running a very, very high fever, and you take drugs which put you into a long sleep, an unconscious sleep, where the pain is killed. And you'd have to have sometimes to survive a painkiller which will kill the pain, putting you into an unconscious sleep, and after a while you have suppressed the pain and things come back to normal activity. Okay. So, medications. If you study medications thoroughly and go back to Old Testament teachings, go into the concordances, go into the ancient Jewish teachings, and you find that in the ancient teachings, the word sorcerer, we are told to avoid the sorcerer with every fiber of our being. Now, where does the word sorcerer come from? It comes from a derivative of pharmacopoeia, which means drugs. And so the technical name, when you go into the history of the whole thing, the technical name of a sorcerer was one who used drugs. And what do drugs do? They suppress symptoms and they kill the pain. Who is the modern day sorcerer? The medical people who use drugs. Where is their temple? The hospital. And this is where people are drugged literally into an insensibility, and this is one major cause of placing holes in the auric field. So that what happens then with your anesthetic that is used for surgery, am I saying that surgery is not necessary? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, because there is a time when surgery is necessary to save a life. But you have to understand, what does surgery do? The anesthetic used for the surgery will suppress the feeling and the pain, rendering a person unconscious, and anything which causes a person to be unconscious will cause a hole in the auric field. Now, that hole in the auric field, in the law of economy that we haven't gone into yet, it's in my books, but in the law of economy, a hole has to be filled. And so the energy pattern of suppressed thought patterns and so on, you will have energy patterns around a person that will be sucked into that hole in the auric field by the law of attraction. And suddenly, after the operation, the person has these feelings that they've never had before. They have reactive patterns that they've never had before. They have sensations that they've never had before. And this comes from this entity with their energy field overlapping two things. Number one, the genetic inheritance that we have, which is our physical body, which we call the constitutional man, and the overriding energy patterns of the spirit or soul that has occupied and entered the body, which is us as an intelligence, where we have this energy pattern that we brought with us from eternity. we override that over the constitutional man or the genetic structure, and that then also has a great thing to do with who we are and what we are and how we react to the surrounding environment. But when you have an entity sitting out there with an energy package all of his own, and that comes into the auric field, then you have more insult to the injury, because we have enough problems handling our own energies that we brought with us, which we'll call our own karmic considerations, that are literally overlaid on the genetic structure or the constitutional man. And we call this pattern that we have ourselves that's overlaid on the constitutional man, we call that the natural man. Now that natural man is full of resistances. Those are our resistances. And these resistances literally block the flow of the Spirit of God through this physical temple that we're dealing with. And therefore, all of these resistances that we have brought with us from eternity, all of these things are impinged upon our body and become literally an enemy to God, because God can't get through. It's all blocked off. We have blocked off God by our resistances. We've blocked off that free flow of the Spirit of God by our resistances. And in like manner, when we have a hole in the aura that is filled by an energy field of another elemental or any type of an energy field of a disembodied spirit or somebody who has died, okay, that energy field will be another thing that we have to overcome. But this is very difficult. I remember when I was back east in the United States, I remembered this one gentleman. He was telling me about this one lady who was, at the time, was 29. I met her personally, and I heard her story. When she was a young girl, she went to the hospital with a very, very, very high fever, nearly to the point of death. She was put under heavy medication. In the next room to her was one of these Amish people wearing the black hat and the black suit. And the mother was aware of this, and the child was aware of this. And this man had a huge cancerous growth on his neck, and he was in the process of death. And his wife was crying, "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." And this old gentleman with this huge cancerous growth on his neck said, "I will never leave you. I will never leave you." In the next room, this little girl was crying out to her mother, "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." In the next room, the old gentleman's wife had to go home that night to get some sleep. She's been with him for 2 or 3 nights and was on the verge of collapse. She went on home, and the old man was there mumbling, "I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you," as he died. The little girl in the next room, Mama had to go home also. The doctor said the girl will be fine. And the little girl was crying out from the depths of despair and grief, "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." The old man died with a cancerous growth on his neck. The next morning, this little girl had a black man in a black suit sitting in the corner of her room. And that man in the black suit and the black hat stayed there in her energy field that she could see as clearly as the wall and the chairs and the tables and the windows and whatnot. And that man stayed there for the next 25 years, or until she was 29. Okay? And so when I was in, what's the name of that place there on in Virginia? Forget the name of the town right now, frankly. But I was in this one town. I was getting trained by a gentleman who was fully trained in what they call color therapy and radionics. His name was Whitehouse, Charles Whitehouse. Some of you may know the name. He's very well known among radionic circles in the United States. And I went to Charles Whitehouse, and I thought to myself, I really need to learn this material. And so I spent several weeks there with him learning radionics and learning the concepts of color therapy. While I was there, I met this lady, and she told me her story. Now, Dr. Whitehouse, at the age of 29, took this lady, who was by that time developing this huge cancerous growth on her neck. Now, how did that cancerous growth get there? How did it get there? By this old man that had the cancerous growth on his neck, with the energy pattern there, superimposed upon her through the hole in her own auric field, because here she is crying out, "Please don't leave me." The old man, dying, said, "I'll never leave you, I'll never leave you." And this is what he said to the young girl from that time on for 25 years, assuring her, "All this time, I'll never leave you." She was in and out of psychiatric hospitals because she claimed up and down the man was there continually, and she spoke to him like I'm talking to you. Just a real companion. Now, Doug and I have seen in B&C classes where people don't talk about these things. We've had the little nun. Remember the nun? The lady from Michigan, and she had this beautiful little nun that she spoke all the time to. The nun was in her energy field and was always giving her very helpful, very loving counsel and advice. And the thing is, when we start talking about holes in energy fields, she decided she wanted to keep her nun there because that was the best friend she had. And she would not release that nun from her energy field, and that was her choice. Even though this nun had died and was sucked into her energy field, and this nun was the history was all there. You can go back into the nun's history, and she can tell you what convent she was in, what she had done in her life, and so on. All the records were there. The day of her death was there, and then she got sucked into an energy field when this nurse was sick. And this nurse was sick at one time, and she sucked in this energy field, and that nun was with her from then on. Hey, interesting. But she could speak with that nun like I'm speaking to you. And the nun would speak back to her just like any good companion, a good mate. And they were there together. Now you might say, well, that's impossible. Well, we would go down to the psychiatric hospitals. What do they call them? The bin, some people call them. Pardon? The loony bin, some people call them. You go down and you talk to those people, and they, like you and I, are just as intelligent, except they might have 1 to 10 to 15 people that are with them in their energy field all the time that they can see and they can talk to. After a little body electronics that closes the holes in the energy field, and after a little exorcism, they're as reasonable and as sincere as you and I are. They're not loony. They've had a few operations, they've had some problems, and they have all these people in their energy field locked in there just securely into the holes in the auric field. These holes in the auric field are very, very real. Yes, Tom? Okay. Now, please understand, this is not a matter of criticizing people for having their nun in their energy field. This is not criticizing people for having some strange illusions about themselves. This is not criticizing people because they have these strange energy fields overlying their energy patterns of their own constitutional man and their natural man. Okay? These are powerful things we're discussing. And while people are having point holding done and are doing point holding, these things start coming out. Okay? People who have had great gifts of channeling, so they think, where they're channeling these people that they see in their energy field. After these holes in the auric field are closed, that so-called gift of channeling is completely gone, because the gift of channeling was coming from a source that was from the astral realm, or the place where spirits are after the death of the physical body. Now, this astral realm is very, very real, and there are some people in this room have that gift, which is a very tenuous gift, and you have to be very careful to understand this gift, because they can talk very clearly and see people who have passed on the same as your dead ancestors. They're very real. Ruth first.
Is that the same with schizophrenia?
This is what they call the same as schizophrenia. Now you folks here have to understand that schizophrenia has maybe 1,000 different facets, of which the holes in the auric field are all pretty well, open and have been filled. But with schizophrenia, you have other things which can be chemical imbalances within the body. I'm talking about chemical imbalances causing people to have strange behavior patterns. And when that chemical balance is corrected medically, all signs of schizophrenia are completely gone. It can be a genetic, inherited series of traits that runs in families, where the genes are the same, where the constitutional man, do you understand the word constitutional man now? That's where genetically we inherit these things. Are we all right? Things are understandable now, aren't they? Bless your heart. Now, we're going to continue on and bother you all a little bit here, and then all of a sudden you'll come to an understanding and your heart will be opened and you'll forgive your fathers and your mothers and your kids and so on for being delightful deviations from the norm. All right? Now let's get on with this a little bit. Nolene first.
Multiple personality disorder, how does that line up with what you're saying?
We have dealt with multiple personality disorders with great difficulty because the person identifies with the energy fields that are within them. And these things have been, in some cases, we've helped some people. In other cases where people do not want to be helped and they remain justified in their attitudes, there's nothing you can do to help them because you cannot remove an invited spirit. Underscore that in your thinking. You cannot remove a spirit that is invited.
I have seen.
Because it's their sole way of living, like they. Yes. So there's nothing there if they don't.
It's their choice. You might say it is their reality. Now, if a person chooses to have a reality which is out of sync with quote-unquote reality, I mean, if this is an apple, you follow me? And we call it an apple, we might call it something else in other languages, but it's still basically, regardless of what language you call it, it's still an apple, and the taste will remain as the same. It'll probably vary a bit depending upon the nature of the taste buds, so that has qualifications too. But there's an apple here. But there are some people who have their own reality that this apple will become a piece of green cheese. And I've had people whose reality is so distorted that they cannot recognize an apple as an apple, but it's a piece of green cheese. And to them, it's a piece of green cheese. It tastes like cheese. It looks like cheese. Everyone knows that's cheese, and that is their reality. And they're so sucked into their own reality because of certain shamanic type things that they've got into, or various witchcraft things they've got into, their mind is so frizzled that they have lost sight of reality. Now this is something I want you to consider because we're dealing here with some types of visualization. People use visualization techniques and go back and try to change history and make history believed to be other than what it is, especially with different forms of hypnosis. Hey, look, if you were born in this body at a certain time, in a certain place, no visualization, creative visualization or otherwise, is going to change that. Truth is a knowledge. Now listen, folks, truth is a knowledge of things as they are, as they were historically, and as they are to be. And no creative visualization or hypnosis or hypnotic techniques to cover up history, to change history, is going to change the fact that certain things happen in certain places at a certain time. Now, we're not here to change history. We're here to help people understand and realize and bring out the memory of the histories that they have resisted, the traumas that we have resisted. I know of one guy who's a hypnotist, and this other person rolled down a hill in a Volkswagen bus and broke up their neck and back and really crashed, hurt other people and so on. They go to this hypnotist, and this hypnotist completely changes the course of history to the point where, in their minds, this never happened. Now, the point of it all is you have put a block on truth for that person where they don't remember, and with the hypnosis causing them to be unconscious in this area. Now, you listen carefully, because many of you are trained in different forms of hypnosis. Some of the hypnosis you use is fully conscious, but some of you have the capacity and have done things like I have done in my earlier years, where we put people into deep hypnotic trances. I was taught this by my older brother. And you put a person to a deep hypnotic trance, and you can have them believe anything you want them to believe. And when I found out that that was not the thing to do, I quit that straight away after a couple of years.
The fuck are you? Days. 12 whole days. Days.